So we've been going through, we're quite far into a series of talks now about the Noble Eightfold Path, which the newcomers are probably hotter on than the rest of us actually, because they're fresh off hearing about it from the follow-on course. So nice one, guys. And so we're quite far down. So can you see this? This is my flip chart. No. Great. So the Noble Eightfold Path, we have the path of vision. So we have a bit of a vision, and then we transform all the aspects of our life in line with our vision. And we're all the way down here near the bottom. We've got all the way down to awareness. And last week, Mike Srivasan started us off on awareness, and he told us about 3 aspects of awareness that are really important in the Dharma life in Buddhism. So I'll just quickly go over those because I think it's important to know. It's a really important little list. So firstly, there's a sort of awareness that allows us to be really absorbed in the present moment and really alive to that. And that is called sati. So these are going to be pinging onto your chat box, courtesy of Vicky. There we are. Oh, well done, one at a time. Brilliant. So that's sati. Excellent. The next aspect of awareness is more to do with having a sense of what you're doing now in a broader context of your life, so that it allows for a sense of continuity of purpose. And that is called sampajanya. Excellent. And then the third aspect is to do with an ethical awareness. So it allows us to be careful about how we behave in relation to ourselves and others. And that is called appamada. Excellent. Well done, Vicky. Thank you. Great. So practicing all 3 of those is really, really important in the Dharma life. But this week, I'm going to focus on sati, the first one, because that's the one that we find in the Noble Eightfold Path. So samyak sati, right awareness, right sati, perfect sati. So I'll spend a little bit of time unpacking sati a tiny bit more in case you missed last week or in case you've not come across it before. So I said that sati is the kind of awareness that allows you to be really absorbed in the present moment and to focus on an object in front of you. Now that might sound a little bit dry. Sometimes it can sound a bit dry to me. So you could think of it in terms of the ability, that aspect of awareness that allows you to be fully alive to the present moment, fully absorbed in the present moment. So everything's very rich and vivid. And so the ability to keep our minds focused on an object. And rather than our mind just sort of sliding off what we're trying to keep it on. And I'm sure if you've ever tried to meditate, which all of us have, we've had that experience of our minds sliding off what we like it to be focusing on. You know, I've decided I'm going to count to 10. Suddenly I realize for 5 minutes I've been thinking about something completely different. So we've forgotten what we were doing. So interestingly, sati literally means to remember or recollect. So that's the very opposite of that kind of forgetting what we were supposed to be doing. So if we look back on our path, which I'll show you again, can we see this? So what we're doing next is meditation. A meditative absorption, samadhi. So it's quite obvious why sati would come at this point, because if we can't focus our minds on an object, we're not going to have the capacity to become concentrated, even in a very mundane way, doing normal tasks, never mind having a deep concentration that's necessary for insight. So that's why it's important that we develop our sati at this point. So I sometimes think, there's a lot of talk about mindfulness, isn't there, these days? And I feel like as Buddhists, we're often being told to be mindful. Be mindful. Like, what shall I be mindful of? Tell me. Well, luckily, this is Buddhism. So there are, of course, many lists to help us with this problem. And you know how much I love talking about lists. So I've selected one of these lists to talk about this evening. And it's Sangharakshita's list of the 4 levels or aspects of awareness that you can find in this book here, which is about the Noble Eightfold Path, and also in his series of talks that he gives about the Noble Eightfold Path, which are brilliant, and I'd really recommend those. And those levels of awareness are things, self, others, and reality. This is for the visual learners amongst us. So first, awareness of things. So when I first got an email from Bodhinaga asking me to give this talk, the very next morning I went to take my dog for a walk around the park, as I do every day. And while I was taking this walk around the park, I thought, well, maybe I'll just spend a bit of time thinking about what I might say in this talk, because I was quite excited. So I started, what are all the interesting things I could say about being attentive to your experience and being alive to the present moment? And before I knew it, I'd been walking in the park for 20 minutes and not seen a single thing around me in the park. It had been completely blank experience to me. I've been utterly somewhere else. And the irony of the situation was not lost on me, let me tell you. I thought it was quite funny that whilst thinking about what interesting things I could say about mindfulness, I had been completely unmindful of my experience. So, but you might think, well, so what? You know, I was thinking about giving a talk. That's quite a nice thing to think about. Well, actually, for a start, it was a shame. You know, I didn't see the trees. I didn't see the views. I'm going to change. I'm not keeping track of time here. Didn't see the views. I didn't even see my dog. I didn't see anything really. I was completely cut off from the world around me. And that's quite disconnecting. And I think, you know, it did leave me with a slightly weird feeling, like I suddenly appeared somewhere where I didn't really know where I was. So slightly uncomfortable. But I was thinking, behaving in that way, in a sort of habitual and conscious way, is very well. We're all connected. We're deeply connected, and if we behave in that way habitually, we can end up feeling quite isolated, quite alienated, almost quite anxious, I think. And those are inherently quite negative, unpleasant states. But even more than this, I think, I didn't see any of the beauty, and I think that was more important. In normal mornings, even when it's pouring with rain and it's freezing cold, there's some beauty there. You know, there's an aliveness. I'm there inhabiting my environment. There's people and animals and weather, and it's alive. But and there's, you know, it uplifts me and affects my day positively. But you know, when I am not paying attention to it, there's nothing of that, and it's not possible for me to experience any beauty and to be uplifted by that. And I was thinking of the Buddha when he says in the Dhammapada, the unmindful are like the dead. And I've always found that a bit mystifying, to be honest. But I thought, oh, maybe this is the sort of thing he means. You know, when we're walking around with no awareness, it's almost like we're a bit like zombies, like the world's completely blank to us and we can't take anything from it. We're not connected to it. So it's true, I think, that if we're not aware, we can't experience the beauty of something. And I also think it's the other way is true, that the more aware we are of something, the more beauty we can experience from that thing. Because it's not just trees and pretty things this means, you know, awareness of things is everything around us. And I think if we can train ourselves to really look and really see the world around us, we will generally inhabit a much more vivid and alive world. I was thinking about when I go on holiday or when I visit a new place that I've never seen before that I've wanted to go, the way I look at it is completely different. You know, I've got really strong memories of traveling home, you know, from the airport in a country I've never been, and looking out the window and thinking, look at those shrubs, look at the weeds, look at the motorway signs. They're all so fascinating because they're different. And I'm really looking at them. And I don't think that weeds and motorway signs are intrinsically more interesting in other countries than they are in the UK. But it's just that I'm seeing them for the first time. I'm seeing them properly. And I did wonder when I was writing this talk, what would it be like if I tried to take that attitude more generally in my life? Like, what if I tried to really look at things as if I'd never seen them before? Because honestly, I never have seen them before. Even if it's something I've seen every day, I'm seeing it as a new person with fresh eyes, and that thing will have changed from how it was the last time I saw it. So if I live my life like this, would I experience more of that sense of wonder and awe almost of the world, as I do when I'm traveling home from a motorway looking at weeds? And that might sound a bit ridiculous, and maybe it's not possible all the time, but actually it's a much more appropriate way to behave, because that's how things are. Like, we don't know, we might think we know the nature of a tree or a shrub or a motorway sign, but really we don't. So if we see things more with awareness, we properly see them. We're seeing them more with wisdom, actually. We're seeing them more correctly, how they really are, as complete mysteries. So that's something about awareness of things. So the next category of awareness that Sangharashta suggests is awareness of self. And maybe I need to go closer. That's it. Yes, awareness of self. And this can be split into 3 aspects: body, feelings, and thoughts. So awareness of bodies. So might sound a bit weird to say be aware of your body. I mean, surely we're aware that we have a body. It's difficult not to be aware we have a body. But actually, I think if we think about it, we're probably not generally very aware of what we're doing with our body. And we probably have lots of thoughts about what we're doing with our body, but that's different. That's not the same as actually being attentive to and having awareness of the actual movements of the body. So we might have sat down, we've probably got more intellectual awareness, because when we sit down to do mindfulness of breathing, it's easy to think, well, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, and you might think that and then think this is really boring, because we're thinking about it. But actually that's very, very different from actually experiencing the movements of the chest, your bum on the chair or the cushion, your shoulders rising and falling. It's a bit of a revelation, really, when you suddenly realize that you've only ever been thinking about your body. You've never actually experienced it. And I think actually, personally, I think I probably did the mindfulness of breathing for quite a long time before I realized that I wasn't doing it really at all. I was just thinking about breathing. So the 4 traditional postures the Buddha talks about are standing, walking, sitting, and lying down. So that's basically all the things we could be doing with our body. So cultivating sati all of the time with our body, not just when we're meditating. And you've probably noticed when you've done activities that are more sort of embodying, so like, Tai Chi or yoga or just even sports, walking around, when we're more in our body, it does have a very positive effect. We tend to become slower and more deliberate in our movements, and that has a very grounding and calming effect. And I think it's much more pleasurable to be in your body, even when the sensations of the body actually aren't themselves that pleasant. There's something very rich and alive about just inhabiting those experiences. And then, of course, if the experiences are pleasant, then you can inhabit those even more fully and really enjoy those. And of course, being aware of our body, what we're doing with our body, is also a really interesting indicator of what's going on inside our minds as well. And that's the other 2 aspects of ourselves that it's helpful to cultivate awareness of. So our feelings and our thoughts. So it's really important to develop awareness of our feelings and our thoughts as Buddhists, because how we respond to things emotionally and how we think about things are basically driving all of our responses in the world. So if we're not aware of our emotions or our thoughts, then we'll be acting very unconsciously, and we won't be able to step in to transform ourselves if we're trying to move in a more direction of acting ethically in the world. So as with our bodies, I think we can tend to be quite vague about the contents of our mind, our emotions and our thoughts, just quite vague about it. And I think because we are vague, we can end up having these quite unconscious responses to things, which can be a bit reactive and not terribly skillful. And an example that I've got of this is from my recent experience when I've not been feeling very well in the last week. And then at the weekend, I started to become really worried that I might have COVID again, which I've already had once, and it was pretty horrendous. So naturally, don't really want to repeat that experience. And so on Sunday, I woke up and I was feeling quite poorly, but I still had to walk the dog. So I started getting the dog ready to go out, and we started heading out. And I realised that I was being quite impatient with him. And so I noticed this, and then when we actually were out on the walk, I started reflecting on that, and I thought, well, actually what had been going on was that actually I was feeling really anxious. I was feeling anxious about what if I had COVID again, and fueling that anxiety with lots and lots of unhelpful thinking patterns about all of the horrible things that it might mean and all the terrible consequences that it would have if I did. And of course, this style of thinking is called papancha. So you might not have come across that before. Papancha is that style of thinking where we feed let our thoughts proliferate and grow and develop until we've created this incredible catastrophe, and our life looks a lot worse and more frightening than it actually is because of the way we've let our minds run on. So I was doing plenty of that, So there's lots of papancha, lots of negative thinking and lots of anxiety. And I was pleased to notice that, because as soon as I did notice it, I could actually do something else different instead. So I can think, all right, well, I'm not going to think those thoughts. Instead I'll do something creative, and I'll go and get a COVID test, and I'll stroke my dog, which is what I did. And that was much more positive. So that was the danger, I think, is that because I was unaware of the anxiety and the thinking, it leaked out. But as soon as there was an awareness, I could do something different. So that's something about so that's the different aspects of self. So the next area, the very interesting area, I think, to be aware of, to develop awareness of, is others. So again, you might think, well, I'm really aware of others. There are people everywhere, especially if you're in lockdown with people. You're probably thinking, well, I'd like to be less aware of others if that's possible. But actually, we're probably not aware in the sense of sati, because having sati in relation to a person isn't just sort of having some vague awareness of their existence. It's really seeing them. It's really, really seeing them. And when I think of this, I think of my preceptor Punyamala, the woman who ordained me. And when she looks at me, I can see that she's really, really taking me in with her whole being. And so they used to say of the Buddha that the Buddha had an elephant gaze. And they said that because when he would look at you, it's like when an elephant looks at you, the elephant has to turn its entire body and head towards you to see you. And they said that the Buddha was like that. His mindfulness was so strong that when he looked at you, it was like a whole elephant looking at you. And I sort of think that that's a bit of what I feel like when Punyamala looks at me, like she sees me with her whole being. And when she looks at me like this, when she's with me in this way, I feel completely seen. So not just my faults, but also my strengths and my potential, so that she's relating to the whole of me. And the effect that has on me is it allows me to grow and to become the best version of myself. And one of the traditional ways that metta is sometimes talked about is in this way. So awareness in this full sense becomes the same as metta. So loving kindness, because metta, when you direct your metta at somebody, it allows them to grow, like sunlight allows a plant to grow. So this really seeing of somebody has this effect, is metta, really. Thinking that's a bit of a paradox, really, because part of being really aware of another person is knowing that you can't really know that other person. So knowing that they're a complete mystery. And if we think we understand them, then we're wrong. We don't. Have you ever, I've definitely had this, like seeing somebody that you might have seen hundreds of times before, and then you suddenly look at them, you really look at them for the first time, and they are completely transformed. They become fascinating, and they may even beautiful sometimes. And maybe you've had this experience doing the metta bhavana about somebody, maybe somebody put in the neutral stage. But really, we don't need to limit ourselves. We can do this all the time. We can do this with anybody. And it can be really, really magical to suddenly see a person in all of their complexity, with all their, humanity, with all their potential. It's really, really magical and a very wonderful gift to give somebody. It can be very easy to relate to other people in terms of utility. So in terms of what function they perform, what we can get from them, what use they are, and how they can satisfy our needs. And it's really easy to do this even with people that we really, really love, to do this unconsciously. And it can be quite sobering to notice when we're doing this. And we probably might notice this when they start behaving in a way that, when we get irritated by the fact that they're behaving in a way which is a bit inconvenient for us, and we'd like them to be doing something else which is a bit more useful for us. And we probably didn't realize that we were even thinking like that until we get annoyed with them. So it's really useful to become aware of this, because unless we're aware that we do relate to people in this way, that we can relate to them in this way, then we can't change that. It's a bit like we tend to go around wearing those sorts of like little foggy glasses that are slightly tainted with our needs and our cravings, and we direct them towards the people all around us, including those we love. and we need to somehow take off those glasses so that we can see people properly, you know, without the taints of our needs kind of fogging up our glasses, so we can see them just as beautiful in themselves. And we can call this sort of awareness aesthetic appreciation. So we're seeing them as beautiful beings in themselves without any sense of what they might be able to do for us, how useful they are. So that's the third person, that's the third thing on the list. So finally, awareness of reality. So what is reality? It's a big topic. We were having a group a few weeks ago and somebody said, what do people mean when they say reality? And I thought, that's a very good question. What do people mean when they say it? It's thrown around a lot, doesn't it, that word? So I was thinking, well, what do we mean by reality? And I think, well, we could think of it as reality is well, how the Buddha saw things when he got enlightened. So when the Buddha became enlightened, which you could say is the ultimate awareness, the ultimate sati, he saw the way things really are. It's just the way things function in the world. So you could say that seeing reality is seeing the world with the eyes of a Buddha. So essentially, seeing the world in this way has to be experienced directly by a person. It can't be communicated in words and concepts properly. And the Buddha was even unsure that he could do this after he got enlightened. He thought maybe he wouldn't because it would be too difficult. Luckily, he changed his mind. But yeah, he thought it would be really, really hard to do. So everything that we hear about reality, about the Dharma, are just different ways to evoke reality, to evoke how things are. So we hear, we hear that things are changing and impermanent. They have no substantial self. We hear about karma. We hear about ethics, about how an enlightened person would behave and how we try to emulate that. So we hear all these kind of evocations and descriptions of enlightenment. So if we want to be more aware of reality itself, probably a good starting point would be to really take in and reflect on these descriptions of reality that we're hearing about. Because although they are only descriptions, they're probably a lot closer to the way things really are than the way our minds normally work. So if we want to have more of a sense of how things are, we can take seriously and really try to feel in our bones the truth of the ways of describing reality that the Buddha communicated through his teachings. Although if we do want to understand them correctly, we have to be careful that we don't take them literally, so and dogmatically, because they are just they're described as fingers pointing to the moon. So we want to be careful not to confuse the fingers and the moons. If we hear a statement about reality, we can be sure that reality isn't like that, but it's moving us more in the direction of reality. So something else we can do, as well as just reflect on the Dharma, is we can reflect on symbols of reality. Symbols can be really helpful because they work in our minds differently to concepts. And I think, well, certainly my experience anyway, reflecting and meditating on a symbol can bring me closer because it's not having to be mediated through concepts. So in some ways, I think having an awareness of reality might be easier through symbols. And a really obvious and very traditional symbol to meditate on in this respect is the Buddha. So very, very traditional practice called Buddhanusati or Buddhanusmriti, meditation, reflection, recollection of the Buddha. And even at the time of the Buddha, his disciples would meditate on him as a way to get closer to reality. And he said very mysteriously to his disciple Vakali, the Buddha, he said, "He who sees the Dharma sees me, and he who sees me sees the Dharma." So he who sees the Dharma sees me, and he who sees me sees the Dharma. So when we meditate on the Buddha and his qualities, so when we meditate on his unshakable strength, his deep compassion, his great wisdom, his huge energy, all these amazing qualities of enlightenment, it's like we're drawing them to us. We're becoming fascinated with them. And there's a great principle in Buddhism that what we dwell on, we become. So the more we dwell on these qualities, you know, this wisdom, this compassion, this energy, the more mysteriously we begin to embody these qualities for ourselves. So the more we start to see with the eyes of the Buddha, actually, we start to become closer to the Buddha's experience. And so when we see things, we do see them a bit more how they really are. So in this way, by meditating on the Buddha as a symbol of reality, we can develop our awareness of reality ever more deeply. So those are our 4 levels of awareness. Do you like my little flip chart? So I'll just recap. So obviously, I mean, I've only had half an hour. There's so much you could say about these things. I've only just scratched the surface of sati, but hopefully it's given a little bit of a flavour of what a life saturated with sati might be like, and why that might be worth our time and energy. So we want to live a life which is more connected, filled with richness and beauty through a deeper awareness of things. We might want to feel more integrated, whole and creative through developing a deeper awareness of our own body, feelings and thoughts. We might want to experience a flowering of our metta and empathy for others through taking them really in fully with aesthetic appreciation. And we may also want to see more with the eyes of the Buddha as we grow more deeply into awareness of reality. Thank you.